Hey guys, today I'm going to be sharing with you my tips on how to find the best possible drop locations in Warzone, helping you to survive longer into games and hopefully get more wins. I've recently got back into Warzone and I found this method is the easiest way to ensure a consistent early game, reducing the chances of getting screwed over by bad luck or RNG. Warzone isn't like many other battle royales. Loadout drops guarantee you decent loot, and if you can't find anything on the floor, you're just able to buy it from a buy station. In other games, if you don't find decent weapons and heals at your landing spot, you're at a severe disadvantage in any fight that you take, especially if the opponent you're coming up against has been luckier than you. This means dropping in highly contested areas rich in loot is advisable, because if you do survive, you'll know that you'll be sorted for the rest of the game. Whereas in Warzone, as long as you can find $10,000 relatively quickly, it doesn't matter where you land. And with an extra $1,500, you don't even need to worry about armour. To get consistent positive starts to my games, I use the Goldilocks method. You don't want to land somewhere too hot, as this adds a large amount of luck and chance to whether you can survive. And you don't want to be landing somewhere too cold either, as this just leads to a boring early game, scavenging between buildings for scraps. And if you do run into someone, you'll likely be underprepared for the fight. So when you're dropping, you need to choose somewhere just right. Using this method, I avoid highly contested areas such as Superstore and generally don't jump until the second half of the plane's route, although sometimes it is necessary depending on where the first circle is located. If you do try and land in these highly contested areas, you're going to find it very difficult to consistently get out of the early game, as you'll definitely be getting into multiple fights and are at the mercy of early game RNG, where your opponent could easily get an assault rifle with full plates and you'll be fighting them off with a sniper rifle and a stim shot. Of course, if you do survive hot drops, you'll likely be sorted for money and loot for the rest of the game, but if you do get sent to the gulag, you'll just be 5 minutes behind everyone else in the map, meaning you'll be playing catch up for most of the game. As we're talking about coming back from the gulag, I'll quickly add the Goldilocks method also works to find the perfect landing spot after you respawn, although you do have to change up the way you find hot areas. On the way back from the gulag, the best way to work out how contested an area is to see how many contracts are in that area. Obviously, this isn't an exact science, but once you've played the game for a while, you'll be able to tell how many contracts are generally in certain places, and if there seems to be a lot less available than you'd expect, you'll know lots of people have landed there to take them, meaning you should find a safer place to land rather than dropping into a load of fully equipped enemies. Anyway, as I said before, it's important to not only avoid hot drops, but also find areas with enough loot to set you up quickly for the game. If you land in the middle of nowhere, yes, you reduce the chance of needing to fight someone, so it's much more likely that you'll survive the early game. But by playing like this, you will not be well set up once you do run into someone. By landing in low loot areas, you're again introducing a lot of luck into your game. Say the house that you land at again only has a sniper rifle and a stim shot, then the next nearest location is 30 seconds away. You're giving everyone in your vicinity an extra 30 seconds to loot up and get sorted, whilst you're running out in the open. This situation does not give you the best odds of winning a fight if it just so happens that you do run into someone. The second reason I like to avoid cold drops is because they're basically just boring. Personally, I don't find looting to be the most enjoyable part of the game, especially as once you've got your loadout you pretty much throw away everything you've collected anyway. Quite often when I do my spectating series, I watch players who land miles away from the action, find a couple of guns, then hide in a house miles out of zone until they're forced in by the gas. Yes, this might guarantee you a top 50 finish, but it must be insufferably boring. By playing like that, you clearly aren't going to improve your gun skill as you hardly get into any fights, and from what I've seen, most of these players get taken out as they're forced to rotate by the zone, rather than proactively moving before the zone closes. I think I'll do a video soon on how to use the gas to your advantage, rather than it just being something that forces you to move from one camping position to another. Now, it's all well and good talking about bad places to drop, but how do you actually decide where the best place to start your game is? I use 3 factors normally when I'm trying to decide where to drop: contracts, rotations, and buy stations. Whilst you have to make your decision based on all 3 in combination, I'll show you exactly what I'm looking for when I'm deciding. So first up, when I'm looking for early game contracts, I tend to go for scavengers. They're especially good as they focus your looting, as you're forced to take a certain route through buildings where you can loot on the way to collect the contract, and typically you have to travel a shorter distance to complete the contract, which just speeds up the looting process. Although it's not just as simple as spotting the first scavenger contract you see and making a beeline for it. I've tried this in the past, and you're normally going to be contested by at least 2 other people. The most infuriating thing is when you manage to fight off everyone, but then realise just before you took everyone out, someone grabbed the contract and then you're just back to square one having to loot from nothing. There are also a couple of other positives to choosing scavengers, as it's handy to know that you're going to be pretty much guaranteed plates once you've opened the final box. And once you've learnt the locations of the loot boxes from specific contracts, you can streamline your looting in that area, or even wait by the final box if an enemy gets to the contract before you to take them out after they've done all the looting for you. To choose which scavenger to go for, I look at the second half of the plane's route and choose one around 500 to 1000 meters away. You don't want to be dropping directly down from the plane's path, as it's more likely to be contested, as people do like to just aim directly at the first one they spot. By going for a more obscure contract, you're going to be much safer. This rule sometimes has to be slightly altered depending on the plane's route and the location of the circle, and this leads us nicely onto the second factor in choosing our drop spot: rotations. When considering this factor, there are a couple of key components: your vicinity to the zone, and also any vehicles in the area that you're landing. The easiest way to break this down is the more vehicles that are in an area, the less you have to worry about how far away from zone you are. A big mistake I quite commonly see is landing far away from zone in an area with only 1 or 2 vehicles. If someone manages to get to the vehicle before you finish looting, you'll obviously have to rotate on foot, which makes you pretty vulnerable, especially if an enemy decides to hold the edge of zone for easy kills and poorly prepared people being forced into the zone by the gas. Even if you land inside of the zone, trying to go for a vehicle is still pretty useful, especially in solos. It'll help you collect any contract you decide to go for by not only speeding up the time it takes to get the contract, but also acts as portable cover if you have to cross over wide open areas. The final point I consider is the location and how many buy stations are in a certain area. As you can have all the money in the world, but if there isn't somewhere safe to spend it, there's not much you can do other than waste time rotating to a different area. Once you've played the game for a while, you'll learn exactly which buy stations are riskier to use. But in general, if you're visible to long sightlines, underneath tall buildings, or in a highly contested area, you're upping the chances that you get taken out when you're helplessly using the menu. I find this to be the most infuriating way to get eliminated, especially as it means that all the time that you spent getting money and looting has basically just gone to waste. And even if you do win your gulag, you're just back to square one all over again. Whilst using this method doesn't guarantee that you'll survive out of the early game, I found it to be the easiest way to reduce the RNG of your drop, and it definitely cuts out all those infuriating deaths where you were just unlucky with your looting. Whilst it may seem like it's quite a passive way to start your game, it's still perfectly possible to rack up the eliminations. If you can get down and get your loadout within the first couple of minutes, you can then use UAVs or even a heartbeat scanner to push opponents who definitely won't have got their guns or ghost yet, meaning you'll be able to easily outgun them with your loadout weapons, and if they try and run, you can just track them through walls. Or, if you want to play as low risk as possible, either try and do a couple of recon contracts to try and find out where the zone will be closing to, or just rotate into a power position towards the centre of the current zone. This allows you to have a massive advantage over any enemies that try and challenge you. If you choose the second option, try and store your vehicle in a safe area where it can't easily be stolen, just in case you're unlucky with where the next zone appears. Just make sure to use the advantage of having all your own weapons and perks before everyone else, and not just hide in a building on the edge of zone, as you're just giving everyone else time to get onto a level playing field with you, meaning all of your hard work at the start of the game will go to waste. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful, make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching!